Hello, and welcome to the Solution Point, where we talk about solutions in your life, the law, and your business. And with me, my co-host, Catalina Dickerson.
Hi, everybody.
And today we have a very special guest to me. He's one of my mentors, and I find it hard to introduce him because usually when I experience his introduction, there is a big sizzle reel and show to describe him. But I will tell you, he is an attorney consultant that will take you from chaos to freedom, and freedom will be whatever you define it to be. So he's a person to get you there. He can talk about all kinds of different things from systems to marketing, but I want to get into it right now. One last thing I'm going to say is he's always known for his trademark, and I believe it is trademark now, for a catchphrase: action kills fear. It is so true. And without further ado, Richard, how are you doing?
Hey, Mike, Kat, thanks for having me on today. It's an honor. I love that you're serving others by sharing the wisdom that you're learning through the years and coming alongside your fellow business owners to give them tips not only on how to have a better business, but have a better life. And so when you asked me to be on, I not only was honored that you thought of me, but also I thought, man, what a great opportunity to come back and give something to those who are trying to figure it out. Because, we're all trying to figure it out as entrepreneurs, right? I mean, it's a different journey every day, it seems like. And so we need each other to kind of pour into one another. So again, thanks for having me here.
Right. And so I think one of the problems that we had discussed getting your solution is pricing. Pricing is always an issue in all businesses. Is you've got to find that sweet spot where you're not pricing something so low that you're actually losing money because you make it up on volume, right? And when two negatives don't make a positive,
right?
Or you're overpriced and your price is just not realistic with your market. Can you talk a little bit about that problem and the solution that you've come up with?
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I think I'm going to go back one step, if that's okay with you, and just give them a little framework of where I come from, because maybe they're thinking, oh, this guy works with attorneys, so what relevance is it going to have to me? You all right if I go back a little bit and tell a little bit of my history?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I come from, I cut my teeth in the insurance industry, in the late 80s. And I learned how to sell. And that was very good for me. It has served me well through the years. And then from there, I went into the family business. My grandfather passed away. He was the third generation of a family business in the funeral business. And the fourth generation, my uncle asked me to come into the business, and I did. And I bought my first funeral home by the time I was 25, and I had my third funeral home by the time I was 28. And by most people's standards, I was successful, although I didn't have a life. I never took a vacation without my bag phone, not a cell phone, but a bag phone. And I never was kind of off call. I was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I did love that business. But I loved insurance and marketing more. And I couldn't figure out how to put a buy one, get one free on the side of the funeral home and get any real results. So I ended up buying a pet supply company of all things. And I invested all my money that I was going to go buy another funeral home into a pet supply company. And we specialized in aquarium stuff like boats, bridges, and castles that went inside of fish tanks. And we grew that business rapidly. We had 3,000 to 4,000 clients throughout the world that we sold these products to. And we had manufacturers in China. And then in around 2007, 2008, like everybody else, and the recession hit, was my first recession as a business owner. I got the wind knocked out of us, right? We found out that fish weren't as cool as cats and dogs. Fish don't fetch. And so when there was a recession, people were going to stop buying aquarium stuff, I guess. And that's what happened. And we kind of lost our shirt. Literally, we had to start all over again. And it was just by happenstance that I ran into a fellow who worked with attorneys. And he asked me if I can help him with his business, meaning his own business, his consulting firm. And I did, and it worked. And he said, hey, do you think this stuff would work for lawyers? And I said, I don't see why not. And so I started teaching lawyers how to do this. And then one lawyer saw me speak from stage and said, hey, I'm starting a new firm. Would you like to try out all your crazy ideas? And I said, Sure, why not? He said, well, here's what's going to happen. He goes, you try all your crazy ideas, and if it works, you get to tell the world about it. And if it doesn't, you get to fail miserably in a public forum. And I'm like, all right, well, let's see if it works. And so
no pressure.
no pressure. And I went for it. I took the chance, and we built that firm from him and I literally sharing a desk. Like, we literally shared a desk. He was on one side, I was on the other side, in an executive suite, to $3.5 million in annual gross sales in just a couple of years. Now, that's a cool story, but the real cool part of the story is that that guy also was able to take a vacation for the first time in his life, like left for a month to go to Turks and Caicos with his family. And he was able to do that because the business was running on systems. And the primary reason why that was able to work was because one of the things that we got right was pricing. Now, it's real important when we talk about pricing, we identify what we're talking about. When I was in the insurance business in the late 80s, I couldn't do a lot to affect my pricing. My prices were set by the insurance carriers, by the underwriters, by the mortality tables. There was things I couldn't do to affect price. And so I really didn't affect price. And so if we're talking about a commodity or a government-based scenario or an insurance-based scenario, you might not be able to affect price in the traditional manner. So we're going to put that conversation in the parking lot. We can address it, but we're not going to have time to address it here today. But in the funeral business, when I grew up, I watched my uncle when he got the price increase, in January for the caskets in the vaults. All I heard, he just clapped his hands and he said, all right, we got a raise. And I go, wait, what do you mean the prices went up? He goes, yeah, prices went up. He goes, but I have a markup on percentage. He goes, so their prices went up. I had my markup on based on percentage. We made more money this year. I'm like, okay, cool. I get it. I understand. It's okay to raise prices. And so, when I bought my first funeral homes, one of the first things I did was increase prices and increase my, not only my service charge, but also the prices on the caskets. And people would say to me, well, how did you know? Like, what if your competitors were charging less? And, back then, and I think it's still the rule today, the federal government said that you could walk into any funeral home and ask for their pricing guide, and they had to give it to you. It's a law. It had like some crazy fine, like a $10,000 fine if you didn't give them your general price list. And so I said, all right, well, I'm going to go around to every funeral home in town and get their prices. And I did. And I literally just walked to my competitors and go, you got to give me your price list. And they knew they couldn't do anything about it. So they gave me all their prices. And then I proceeded to take all of their prices and find the highest price guy and make my prices 10% higher. And I just wanted to make sure that we were going to give the best service. We were going to be the highest priced firm in the area. Now, that's contradictory to most people's thinking because they want to be like the average of everybody else, or they think they need to be the lowest price of everybody else, or people won't do business with them. And we did business with families over and over and over again, generation after generation, and they never once balked about the price. And so that brings my first point, Mike and Kat. In order to get pricing right, it has to start right here. Mm-hmm. We have to be willing to understand that we sell value. Now, if we're just raising prices because, like my uncle said, ooh, we get a raise. Now, that was cool. It was a nice story. But the reality is that wasn't the only reason why my uncle knew he had to raise prices. See, he had to raise prices because if he didn't raise prices and his costs went up, which all of our costs go up in different ways based on the business that we're in, his ability to service client was going to either squeeze out his profit or he was going to make it so he couldn't serve his client as well. And so he needed to make sure he had the proper profit in place in order to make sure that he served his clients well. In addition, if you're going to run advertising or marketing campaigns, it gets harder and harder to do some of that stuff and sometimes more and more expensive. And if you really believe you're the best at what it is that you do, like Mike, Kat, I assume you guys believe you're the best firm at what it is you do in your area. Is that a fair statement?
That's right.
Yeah. So if you believe that you're the best at what it is that you do, then in my opinion, what we need to do is ensure that everybody in your area who needs your services chooses you. Well, in order to do that, I have to have the profit to be able to market into the community so they know I exist, so they can hear my unique competitive advantage. And so I believe that if we get our minds right, we'll know that profit leads to helping more people. See, if we believe what we do will really help people and we create value in this world, which is a kind of, in my opinion, entry into the game, like the ante to get to the poker table, then what we want to be able to do is help as many of them as possible. And if we can help as many of them as we possibly can by being massively profitable, then that's the path I want to be on. Is this making sense?
Oh yeah,
It's
definitely.
fantastic.
And I like what you're saying about you've got to get it in your mind, because I know a lot of my colleagues, both in the Richard James group and just out everywhere, you've got to be able to say what your price is and believe it.
That's
You
right.
can't just say, well, today it's going to be this. You've got to know what you're worth, and you've got to be able to say it solidly and confidently, and you can't waver from it. So, knowing your worth, it starts in your mind.
Yeah. So Mike, I'm glad you said that. I mean, when you're sitting across that table and whether it be virtual now or a physical table, you've got to have the confidence to be able to say that number. And in the early days, here's what's going to happen, because I know, because it happened to me and it happens to everybody else. You say that price and you're so tempted to like want to retract it and like want to justify it somehow. And you just got to like have the nerves of steel to say the price and then shut up and like let them answer, right? And it's amazing what happens when they'll say, oh yeah, no big deal, or worse, they'll go, oh, I thought it was going to be a lot more than that. Oh my goodness, that's like the worst thing anybody could ever say to me. Matter of fact, that's happened. Michael and I are launching a business now, and in the early days when we were doing the beta pricing, one of the first one or two clients goes, man, I thought it was going to be a heck of a lot more than that. I'm like, well, Michael, you know what that means? Prices have to go up. Right? So,
yes.
So that's that telltale sign. But I think it comes down to three things. After we get our mindset right, we have to pay attention to a couple of other things. Let's focus on at least two. And so one of them is, all right, how do we justify our price? Besides the fact that we do a good job and we're good at what we do, how do we create this environment where we justify the price? Okay, so we've gotten over our mental hiccup. We're getting to the point where we will allow ourselves to increase the price incrementally, not all at once, but incrementally till we feel comfortable where we get it, where we want it. And then we have to now justify it. So I think there's the justification that we do a good job and we get the result, or the desired result. And then there's the justification of the of what the appearance of the justification is, right? So this is where we come into what's called micromanaging the client experience, right? So the way in which we create a value in the mind of the prospect is by ensuring that not only are we good at what we do and we have a unique competitive advantage over our competitors, but that we stand out in all the ways that we communicate with them from the very first contact forward. So Mike, you and Kat do an excellent job of this, right? You have created a white glove level service because you may charge the right price for your services, but you don't just like, you don't sell swamp juice in a perfume bottle, is what I always like to say, right? You give real value for the dollar, but you also give real perceived value for the dollar. So when somebody calls you or they email you, they're going to be communicated with rapidly. Like they're not going to have to wait for a response. Is that an accurate statement?
Correct.
I'll tell you a quick anecdote. I had a client come in, and I always ask, how they came to us, who can we thank for the referral? And he said, well, you can thank your receptionist because she answered the phone, because I called a bunch of other attorneys and nobody even answered the phone. She's the first one to answer the phone. I mean, as simple as that.
Isn't that sad? It's happy because that's how easy it can be sometimes. I'll tell you, you're right. My wife is turning an age that I'm not allowed to mention. And I'm having a party for her at the house. Well, I'm not going to be here. She insisted I wasn't going to be here, matter of fact. And I'm inviting her friends from Arizona to come out because we moved to North Carolina. And so I wanted to hire a private chef to come out and cook them a nice meal at the house. And so I don't know anybody here. So I just started Googling and I called 3 people and two didn't get back to me. One went to the owner's cell phone and said, oh, his receptionist was off today, so he answered his own calls, but he was at the park with his kids. Could he send me his information tomorrow? I said, absolutely. Is this your cell phone? No, it's the office line. Okay, well, here's my cell phone. You got a pen? Yeah, I wrote it down. Okay, text me, email me, whatever you got to do. I heard nothing, not a word. I'm like, all right. So I called somebody else. I realized I'd gotten nothing like 2 days ago. I'm laying in bed and I'm scrolling through my phone looking for solutions. I find another one. I'm like, well, I'll try this one. I'm like, all right, this time I'll just fill out the form. I filled out the form on their website. Son of a gun. They call me back the next day. She goes, why do you mind if I ask why you chose us? I go, yeah, because you returned my call.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know what your food tastes like. You know, right now, like you would think hiring a private chef, like the basis of this would be how good is your food? No, the basis is, will you return my phone call? It's so sad, right? Which means it's so easy to win out there, right? I didn't ask that lady. I didn't ask her about price once.
Yeah.
I just wanted somebody to service me well, right?
Yeah.
So I'm doing a lot of talking. It's your show. Do you have any other questions that I've led you down, or you want to continue on this micromanaging the client experience?
I love the micromanaging the client experience, because I definitely have a heavy hand on that, and I love that part. But you brought up a point earlier, and when we're talking about pricing and how you need to increase your pricing enough to accommodate a healthy profit, right?
Right.
And I can only imagine that can probably be different, industry specific.
Sure.
Or is it what could be maybe not so much like a test, or what would you put that up against, as far as like, what, XYZ questions, because I need, X profit. What are the things that someone should be asking themselves to determine how big should that profit margin be?
Yeah. So I would say the mistake that everybody makes is they go and they look at what their industry does. And then they think that they should be like the average of what everybody else does. And if you go to I used to make this mistake years ago when I would go to my CPA and I would say, well, what should my profit be? And he'd be like, well, if you can have a 10% profit, that would be healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you stories of 20 clients I know of personally right now that are keeping 45% to the bottom line and servicing the heck out of their clients, right? And so if I told them 10% was the right number, I would have left all of that money on the table for them, right? There are many businesses out there that 10% is the bare minimum. Now, there are some businesses that 10% is healthy. I've never owned a restaurant, but I've been told that, margin restaurants can be skinny. It's one of the reasons why I've never owned a restaurant. But so I don't think we should compare ourselves to the industry. What I think we need to do is one, become self-educated. So there are great authors out there like Mike Michalowicz and Greg Crabtree, both wrote great books on the subject of profit. And I think you need to know the basics of how your P&L works. So Kat, to your answer, like the first thing I'm going to ask myself is, if somebody asks me about profit, the first question I ask them is, how often do you see your profit and loss statement? Mm-hmm. Right? Because if you're not looking at the dashboard of your firm and paying attention to it, then that tells me that you're not all that serious about it, right? Because if this is important to you, you're going to be paying attention to your profit and loss, at least monthly. For me, I get an updated P&L. I can go and get an updated P&L every day, but it's updated by my bookkeeper every week. So every Tuesday, I can go into my P&L and I can see my updated numbers on a weekly basis. And so the next thing I want to be able to do is instantly look at my profit and loss as a percentage. So in every industry, it's a little bit different on what your percentages should be. Like how much money should you be investing in every dollar invested in revenue? In marketing. How much should you be investing in every dollar in revenue in labor? How much should go towards rent? How much should go towards cost of goods? And there are some industry specific standards that you need to know about in your particular industry. We know what they are in law. We know what they are in consulting and funeral homes and things of that nature. But there are other industries that are slightly different, and they need to make sure they know what they are. And there's likely an expert who has posted the truth about what your numbers should be. Now, Greg Crabtree in his Simple Numbers book does lay out some of the industry specific percentages, but they're generic, right? So I think you need to figure out what your percentages should be and make sure we're then setting goals for them. But as Mike McCallowitz said, Kat, to your point, the first thing we want to be able to do is identify, like, how much do we want to keep? So if you say 15% is the number that I want to keep as profit, my question would be, are you using the old formula, which is gross revenues minus expenses equals profit? Or are you using the new formula, which is gross revenues minus profit equals expenses?
Right.
The difference is, right? The difference is when you do it the old way, you spend everything and whatever's left is yours. And you wouldn't treat an employee that way, right? You couldn't ever tell the employee, well, listen, we'll pay for everything else. And if I have any money left, I'll pay you. That doesn't work. So the new way says, no, we're gonna get gross revenue. We're gonna identify the profit, and then we're gonna figure out how to spend what's left appropriately. And so that's kind of how I start that discussion as far as what to look at. Some things are very industry specific based on what percentages you should have. But if you're not getting your reporting, you don't know what your percentages should be, and you're not taking your profit first, we should fix those three things first. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, definitely. And then to loop back into your second point about micromanaging experience and kind of what we've just been talking about, if someone does want to raise their prices and inherently, hopefully raise their profits too, hand in hand goes, they have to make sure that they have, like you said, the value. They need to create that culture for the client to have that expectation that, I'm not going to bat an eyelash about paying this price because it's worth it.
Correct.
And so, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that, that and maybe how the nuances of micromanaging the client experience that have really maybe been game changers for some of your clients.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I'll tell you that while it's true, we need to create this value. Most small business owners I know could easily increase their price and not have to affect much in the value aspect. They're just not charging enough, right?
Right.
So like most people I know, they just need to say, okay, I'm going to increase my prices by 30%. And I'm not going to increase my price by 30% tomorrow. I'm going to increase my price by 5% tomorrow. And then if that works in the next week, I'm going to increase my price another 5%, and so on.
More than likely, they are rolling out the red carpet for their clients. They're probably more than likely, it's a competitive market out there. They're trying to do their best, and maybe they've been underpricing themselves. So it's just about to get to that, bringing their pricing to the value that they're already providing.
Correct. And I couldn't agree with you more.
Speaking from being on that side of the equation, it's one of those things that is scary, because you think, well, if I raise my price, people are not going to pay, people are going to balk at it. But the first time you say that big price, and then they say, okay, do you take credit cards or do you want to check?
Right.
It's great, because it's like, oh, wait a minute, I was underpricing. It's that validation.
Right.
It's, you just have to do it.
Yeah. There's lots of ways to fix this thing called our mind, right? You can go mystery shop some of the other companies in other areas that do what you do and see what they charge. Mm-hmm. But I would say that the first step is, let's just start by slowly increasing your price incrementally. Now, you brought up a good point, Mike, that we're in that closing room, and we have to talk about that a little bit too. So let's talk about micromanaging the client experience. So as we talk about this, Kat, this is how you micromanage the client experience all the way through. So we talked about speed, getting back to people, just answering our phones. Mm-hmm. Now, once we set an appointment with somebody, how are we in making sure we micromanage that experience? I know your firm goes as far as getting custom drink orders. Am I right?
Correct. When folks set up, before they show up, we have a receptionist give them a call, and not so much to remind them about the appointment, because we've already done that, but what is your beverage of choice? And it leaves them kind of dumbfounded. And we've had some funny stories like, oh, well, I'll have a margarita, or I'll have, a glass of wine. And she laughs at it. But I said, I told her, if they want a margarita, I'm going to go get a margarita. You know, that's
Right.
what you'd go tell me what they want. And it was what we do the call the day before so we can be ready. But yeah, we have in our cabinet some little canned, you know, Ritas just in case someone really does take us seriously. But it's, you know, you've got to, that's a mindset, you know, and you have to also get your staff in that mindset. Like, I am not kidding. I am here to put the white gloves on, roll out that red carpet, and everybody else needs to be on board as well.
That's right. And well, and that, you know, that comes from leadership, setting the right culture, and making sure that the the culture that you have in your core values boils all the way down to everybody else in your firm. I know you want to talk about core values in a little bit, but so looking at how we're touching that person, not literally touching that person, but touching that person through communication, and how are we showing ourselves to be different? So are we reminding them with a text message? Are we reminding them with an email? Are we calling them? Are we doing what we call, you guys are calling a warm hug call, where you're making them feel special and taking their beverage order? Are we sending them a shock and awe package? You know, shock and awe package means we're arriving in a box with something that separates, shows you're different than everybody else. I'm assuming you guys do something like that as well, correct?
Right.
Yes.
And so then once they arrive, if they come in person, you know, how are we, do they have a parking space, and can we put their name on the parking space? Are they going to a certain conference room, and can we put their name on the conference room? When they come in, do we have a packet, and is their name on the packet? What do we have in our office that showcases who we are and what we're about? And do we have testimonials from other clients, and what are we giving them to read, and what's on the TV? And thinking through all of this, what odors are in the air? Do they smell baked cookies? Do they smell burnt popcorn? You know, what are they smelling as they walk through the office? What are they seeing? Is the carpet worn and torn, or is it nice and clean and neat? Are the furniture appointings, you know, clean and tasteful, or is everything haphazard? You know, what are they seeing? And from business to business, this differs as to what it is they need to see. And I understand that. And we have to speak the language of our customer. And so you want to make sure that whatever they should be seeing, they are seeing. But your job as an owner is to think through this, because they're registering all of those things. Even if they don't admit to registering all those things, they are. And every one of those building blocks are, you know, building the case for the value that you're making, which leads us to that next step. But before I go there, do you guys have any questions about that, or anything you wanted a +1 on in that micromanaging conversation?
That
No, I
sounds
think
great.
you hit it right on the nail right on the head.
Okay, so there's one last thing, and that's the room, the consult room, the closing room, right?
Mhm.
And so, you know, one, we have to have a mindset about our price and get away from this. We have to be the less expensive, and let's figure out how to make sure our firm is profitable so we can charge the right fee. The second is we have to build perceived value and real value for our clients by micromanaging the client experience as well as serving them well. And then third, we have to get really good at asking for the order. And so in the early stages, as I said, most of, you know, the small business owners out there could likely raise their fees, raise their prices, and not have anybody balk because they were already charging too little, and everybody kind of knew it. But once you get past a certain point, there is a point at which you have to make sure that you're in the sales room, or whenever you make that closing deal, whether you're a lawn care company and you're closing that deal on the you know, threshold of the home, or you're an HVAC company and you're coming into the kitchen table, or your insurance company, or whatever it is that you can affect, that price is being affected and you have to close the deal. You have to make sure you're running a properly structured and scripted closing process.
Mhm.
It has to be the exact same every single time. And while this is going to be a little proud dad moment in just in a second, I'll tell you a story about my son. So my son's 22 years old. He already is a successful businessman himself. And we decided to go into business together. And once we really boiled it down to what we wanted to do, we realized we both have a passion for sales and helping people become better salespeople. We love great salespeople. We love being sold by great salespeople, and we despise walking into terrible sales situations. And we oftentimes won't buy just because of how bad it is. And so we found ourselves wanting to build this. So we said, well, the way we're going to build it is we'll test it. And so I found one of our clients who was looking for this test, something similar to happen. And I put Michael in with them, got their permission, put him in there to see what he would do. And, you know, in the first week, Michael would tell you that he was calling me every night going, Dad, if they'll just let me do it. I mean, every time they're on the phone, they'd run 2 different scripts every single day. It's like they never do the same thing all the time. And I'm like, well, that's how most people do it. And he goes, no, it's supposed to be the same every single time. I go, I know. So you'll get your chance. And so anyway, he takes over, and, you know, within 90 days, he sat in about just under 100 phone consults and Zoom consults. And he closed 95% of his Zoom consults, and he closed 73% of his phone consults for a total close rate of whatever, 78 or 80%. 80%, that means 8 out of every 10 people that walked in the door closed the deal. And 97% of those deals were closed in the first meeting. Wow. And in addition to that, just yesterday, he closed 5 out of 6 deals, and 4 out of the 5 paid in full. Right? Now, why was he able to do that? Is it because he's special? Well, he's my kid, so I can call him special. But it's not just because he's special. It's because he used a system that was designed to maximize closings, to maximize getting the money down, and to minimize the rebuttals about price. And when you build the closing room correctly, you will ensure that your price doesn't get questioned. And when it does, you can oftentimes put it in the parking lot and bring it back out, and oftentimes overcome it because of the way the consult was built. And so that would be the final step. It's an advanced step. It's not what you have to do right away. But if you can fix the consult room, you can help create price elasticity for your business. Mm-hmm. Now, they may not call it a consult room. They might have called it the kitchen table or the front lawn or whatever, right? Depending on the type of business they are.
But it's having a method. It's having that method, sticking to it. Sure, it might be, you know, repetitive, but it's only repetitive to the salesperson, because right. God willing, you're having, you know, new folks, or you're having repeat clients, and hopefully you have that's what I wonder how your son's going to deal with. And of course, it may be a complete situation, because I don't know what type of firm or the law practice. And we had bankruptcy. We had Charles last week. Yeah. So we talked about serial filers there. Yeah. But in any case, for the most part, we always want a repeat client. Yeah. So I'm interested to find out, maybe in the 2.1 of this conversation, what he does, or how he, you know, flips the script a little bit when you get a repeat client. I'm just interested. We'll hear more later, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the answer is you don't. So you may have to trim, because you don't have to do any credibility building, and you don't have to do any, you don't have to tell them as many of the, you know, questions. You don't have to get them validity on how you're going to serve them. You already know that. So you're going to have to chunk out different areas, but you're still going to follow the formula, and you're going to get an affirmation anyway. So where I would normally tell them what I would do, and I would ask them if it sounds like it makes sense, rather than doing that, I'd say, well, you know, we always have done this for you last time. You agree we did that, right? Yeah, we did this for you last time. You agree we did that, right? And your client, you know, might at some point go, man, you know, you've already, you know, run me through this. And you right. say, well, and whenever anybody says that to me, I say, well, this is exactly why you wanted to do business with me, because we do things the same way all the time. Mm-hmm. With excellence, which means we're going to handle your second situation, or your second matter, or your second instance of business the same way we handled the first instance of business that you were happy about, right?
That's love that best
answer you can give them.
Yeah, no, I love that, because, you know, some clients are very observant, and they're just being, you know, they're just kind of, you know, maybe being cute about it, but it just reinforces the value of a good salesperson too. And that they're going to just stick to that, and stick to their guns, and reaffirm the value of the company.
Now, yep. Rich, I want to respect your time. I know you've got some other commitments coming up. Let's jump into core values what core value would you share with us?
Well, this one in particular is always be excellent, right? So talking about today, I think it's the most relevant one. So excellence is one of our core values. And that's this idea where we are going to go the extra mile to ensure that we're making sure that everything is done with excellence and purpose. That doesn't mean that we're not going to make mistakes. I disagree with that. I think we make mistakes all the time. And in many cases, I believe that our clients and our customers can find out who we really are as a company by the way we handle when we make a mistake. But excellence is about a state of mind, right? That we are going to try to do things with excellence rather than putting it off on the client or the customer that it's their fault, rather than putting it off on our employees that it might be their fault. Everybody is going to take this responsibility to be excellent at what it is they do, which means we have to work at it, right? So if everybody, whether you're the business owner or you're the employee of the firm, a couple of things have to exist. First, you have to like what you do. So if you're in a business that you don't like what you do, my suggestion is go sell the business and go do something else, because you're the business owner. So you better like what you do. You chose it, and if you didn't choose it, then you can fix it. So one, you got to like what you do. Secondly, you got to feel like you're paid a fair market-based wage. And if you're doing work in the firm, you should be paid in the business that you own. You should be paid, and you should also have profitability as the investor and owner of that business. There should be profitability that you get to realize every year. And so, if those two things are in place, then we can move to the third phase. Now, if those two things aren't in place, nobody ever gets to stage 3. So that's part of the problem, which is why pricing is so important, so we can get to what we like we do. Some people don't like what they do because they don't make any money at it. Some people feel they're not paid a fair market-based wage because they're not charging enough, right? So we got to get to those two things. But once we get through those two things, everybody, every employee, every owner, they need to work towards mastery, which means they need to be watching podcasts like this with you guys. They need to be reading books. They need to be learning how to get better at their craft, at their skill, whether it be how to do an Excel spreadsheet, or whether it be how to create a marketing piece, or whether it be how to serve the client, customer, or patient. You need to make sure that you're the very best at what it is that you do. And that takes practice. It doesn't just come overnight. And so it takes practice, persistence, and working at it. So excellence. You want to be able to charge the right amount. Make sure that you and your team are excellent at what it is that you do.
Right. Well, this is fantastic information. I want to thank you again, Richard James. And if we can get a hold of you, I know that your website is therichardjames.com, correct?
Yep.
And we'll have that in the description. Is there any other way that you like to be contacted, or we should let our viewers know?
So we only work with attorneys. So there's no risk of me, if you're a plumber, a doctor, or a dentist, we don't accept those clients. Not that we don't think we can help you. It's just that I've decided to be very specific to our niche. But if you're an attorney and you consider yourself entrepreneurial minded and you'd like to learn what it's like to work with us, the very first thing you should do is go to therichardjames.com and grab a copy of my book, The Attorney's Guide to Personal and Financial Freedom. It's likely the first step on the journey with us. And if it still makes sense to do business, then we'll schedule an appointment and have a conversation. As my grandmother said, we'll date before we get married. So thanks for having me on today. I hope that I gave some value and some insight to folks that are watching or listening. And if anybody has any questions from this podcast, they're welcome to email me directly, richard@therichardjames.com. Happy to help them and give them any answers I can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rich. And
lucky green pen always.
Lucky green pen. Lucky green pen. I've got mine here.
Very good. Yes. So we want to think of pricing with our lucky green pen.
That's right, because green is the color of money, right?
So those of you watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button down below. And we thank you, Rich, for being on here. And thank you. And again, don't forget to like and subscribe The Solution Point.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.